Hi guys, it's Mr. Dan. For those of you that have me, I hope you're all doing well. For those of you who do not have me, you're going to be getting videos from myself, from Mrs. Esposito, and from Mrs. Chang. We're going to try to keep it as similar as possible to our normal classes, so you're going to have a warm-up right here. What I would like you guys to do is to pause the video at this point and try to do these questions on your own. So pause it right now, try these 4 out, and then you can play it. I'm going to go through the answers now. Hopefully you got all 4 of these done. It says, what are 2 numbers that we want to multiply to 12 and we want to add to 7? So I'm going to start out. Let's think of numbers that multiply to 12. We can say 6 and 2, 4 and 3, 12 and 1. Which one of these pairs adds to 7? And it looks like it's going to be 4 and 3. So for this one, I'm just going to say 4 and 3. When we start thinking of 2 numbers that multiply to 36, we should think 6 and 6, but that does not add to 13. We can think 36 and 1, 18 and 2, and then 9 and 4. And if you add up all those different pairs, the only one that adds to 13 is 9 and 4. Now we have a negative number. So if you want 2 numbers to multiply to be something negative, then one of them has to be negative. So let's just think of 18 first. Numbers that multiply to 18 that might get me close to 3 could be, let's say, 18 and 1. That doesn't, let's make one of them negative. That's not going to work because that gives me negative 17. And if we think 6 and 3, 6 and 3 multiplies to 18, but I want them to add to 3. So if you think 6 and negative 3, 6 plus negative 3 is 3, which is what we were looking for, and it multiplies to negative 18. So my 2 numbers are going to be 6 and negative 3 for this one. And the same thing here, we have a negative number, so I want to think of factors of 32 that remind me or might add up to negative 4. So I'm going to say 16 and 2, that's not going to work. How about 8 and 4? Well, 8 and 4 adds or multiplies to 32, but I need one of them to be negative, so I have to get negative 32. And if they have to add to negative 4, it's going to have to be negative 8 and positive 4. Okay, so we're going to keep doing these type of problems to get you in the hang of it, because it's going to make your life a little bit easier when we start getting into some newer content. For today, here's the plan. You're used to this slide. This is the first lesson in your new unit called Polynomial Functions. We're going to take some notes. You guys will do some practice. There's some extra practice at the end if you want, and then you will have a homework worksheet as well, which is also posted on Schoology for you. So let's get to work. If you need to pause it at any time, go for it. You should have notes that look just like this. If you're able to print them out, that's awesome. There's a Word doc you can print them for. If not, you can just write them down on a blank sheet of paper. So the first thing we're going to look at is classifying polynomials by degree. So degree is another name. Degree is always the highest exponent. So let's say degree is the highest exponent. Okay, so we're going to look at some different things. Now, if we have something and it has a degree of 0, which means there are no exponents at all, that means we're going to call it a constant term. And I know we've heard constant before. So you want to make this little table in your notes if you're doing it by hand. If there is something called a linear term has a degree of 1. So that might be something like 8x, because if you think of the degree, the exponent we have attached to this x is invisible. It's a 1 right there. Okay, a degree of 2, which means that we have an exponent of 2, maybe 8x squared. We call that a quadratic term. And then a degree of 3 is called a cubic term. So maybe that looks something like 6x to the third, because the exponent is 3. Anything above a degree of 3, so maybe 5x to the fourth, or 6x to the 7th, or 9x to the 100th, we just call that whatever the degree is. So this thing right here would be a 4th degree polynomial. This thing right here would be a 7th degree. This would be a 100th degree polynomial. Okay, and then from there we're going to start talking about the number of terms. Now, number of terms are always separated by a plus or a minus. Okay, so when we look down at number 1, number 2, and number 3 below, you could see some of them have pluses or minuses in between, some of them do not. So the number of terms we're going to say is going to be based on my thing just cut out for a second. It's going to be based on how many pluses and minuses we see, really. So when we have something that is one term right here, we're going to call it a monomial. That's an I. When you have two terms, we're going to call that a binomial. Three terms is going to be a trinomial. And four terms or above, we're just going to call it a polynomial. Okay, so you have some examples. One term might be something like 6x. There's only one term there. There's no plus or minuses. If we have two terms, it might be 6x plus 3, because 6x is a term and 3 is a term. Three terms might be 3x squared plus 4x plus 6, because we have 3x squared, 4x, and 6. And then a polynomial, anything with 4 or more, could be 3x to the fourth plus 2x squared plus 3x plus 4. Something like that would be a polynomial. Okay, so when we name these things, when we classify them, we're going to classify them by the degree and by the number of terms. Okay, so first we're going to look at the number 1, and we want to look at the degree. Well, the degree right here is 3, because that's the highest exponent, and then the number of terms, we have one term. And when we said we have one term, we're going to look back at our chart, we call that a monomial. So I'm going to call this when it's the third degree, we call it a cubic monomial. Okay, so it's always going to have a first and a last name. We'll think of it like that. For the next one, we want to look at the highest degree, or the highest exponent. The degree here is 2. Once we see a degree of 2, we think quadratic. So this is a quadratic. And then there are two terms, the y squared and the 64. So when we have two terms, that's a quadratic binomial. Okay, for the next one, we want to see how our highest degree, our highest exponent is a 4, which means we say just fourth degree. And a fourth degree, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 terms of fourth degree, and we said 4 or more is just a polynomial. Okay, so we're naming these things with the first and a last name, fourth degree polynomial. Okay, now after that, in your notes, you should have a spot for you to try these things out. So at this point, I want you to pause it, try these out. I'm going to go ahead and write the answers out for you. Once you are done, you can play it and see how you do. So bear with me for a sec while I write these down. This one has, let's see, fourth degree. And there are two terms, so it's a binomial. For the next one, we have the degree here is 1. So I say this is a linear monomial, because there's only one term. Always refer back to that table that you have. Next one, we have a degree of 2, so this is a quadratic monomial. Here we have a degree of 2, so it's quadratic again. Binomial, because there's two terms. Next one, we have a fourth degree. 3 terms, so it's a trinomial. And the last one is a fourth degree. And there's 2 terms, so I say it's a binomial. Okay, so you should have graded yourself on that, see how you do. We should be ready to move on at this point. So from here, we're going to go to some different operations. So first, we're going to talk about adding polynomials. Okay, so if you look at this first example I have, there's a plus in between. So when there's a plus in between, here we just have to combine like terms. Okay, so we want to look, and let's write it out without the parentheses first. We don't really need the parentheses here. 3x plus 7 plus 2x squared minus 6x minus 4. And you want to look for the like terms, and you're always going to go from the highest down. We put it in standard form. So we have an x squared right here, and we have an x squared right here. So 6x squared and 2x squared gives me 8x squared. When we look at the x terms, there's 3x minus 6x. 3x minus 6x is negative 3x. And then the last thing we have, we'll put boxes around these things called the constants because there's no variables. 7 minus 4 is just going to be 3. So again, we're just combining like terms. You should try out anything that says practice. You guys should try out on your own. I'm going to go ahead and put the answer in here. I'm going to write it out without parentheses first. And we have a t squared and a 3t squared, which is 4t squared. Negative 6 plus 11 gives me 5. Okay, so adding, we just combine like terms. So similar to what we did before, I'm going to give you guys another one that looks like this. Again, we're adding. I'm going to avoid writing it out without parentheses this time. So 6x squared and 2x squared is 8x squared. 10x and 4x, they can be combined. So you have the same variable, and exponent is 14x. And then we just have 1 minus 7. That goes right there. Try this next one on your own. Pause this video. Play it when you're ready. I'll go through the answer. 2p to the third and 9p to the third is 12p to the third. 6p squared and 11p squared is 17p squared. 10p and 3p is 13p. Okay, so that is adding. Should be pretty straightforward with you. Should remind you of just combining like terms. Now we're going to get into subtraction, which makes it a little bit more complicated, but we should be good. It's nothing we haven't seen before. When we subtract, we first have to distribute the minus. Okay, so this thing right here, we're going to distribute to each term that's being subtracted. So when I write it out, I'm going to get rid of the parentheses. So it's going to stay as 2x to the third plus 4x squared minus 6. But now I'm subtracting, I'm minus 5x to the third. So distribute this negative, it becomes minus 2x. Distribute the negative here. Well, a negative times a negative, you should be thinking is a positive, so it becomes plus 2. And now once we get to this point, we're just going to go back to what we did before and combine like terms. So 2x to the third minus 5x to the third, they're all the x to the third terms, becomes negative 3x cubed. 4x squared, it looks like that's the only x squared term, so that's just going to come down to be 4x squared. Next we go to x terms, so we have a minus 2x right here, so that'll come next because we go in order. And last we have a negative 6 and we have a positive 2, which gets me minus 4 when I combine those. And we leave it just like that. So if we had to name this, you should be thinking this would be a cubic, and there's 4 terms, so polynomial, a cubic polynomial. Okay, you can practice this one if you want. I will do it on here. You can distribute this minus. So we get v to the third plus 6v squared minus v minus 9v to the third, because I distribute here. Minus a negative becomes plus 7v squared. Distribute this negative, and negative times a positive is negative 3v. Combine your like terms. We have a v to the third and a negative 9v to the third, which is negative 8v to the third. 6v squared plus 7v squared is 13v squared. Negative v minus 3v is negative 4v. Okay, if you feel like you're comfortable with this, you can try these next two out on your own. I'm going to show you one more, and then you'll do the next example, the next practice one on your own. So I'm going to take this negative, distribute it in. Here it looks like we have more variables going on, but that's fine. We're still going to combine like terms in the end. So I get 5y squared plus 2xy minus 9 minus 2y squared. Negative and positive gives me a negative 2xy. Minus a negative, distribute that, it becomes a plus 3. Okay, from there we're combining like terms, so you should see the 5y squared minus 2y squared is 3y squared. 2xy minus 2xy. Well, 2xy minus 2xy cancels out completely because you're subtracting out the same thing, so that goes away for this one, which is cool for us. And then we have minus 3 plus 3 gives me minus 6, so that should be your final answer for this one. Okay, if we had to name this, which we did not ask you to do, this is a quadratic binomial because it's second degree and we have 2 terms. I want you guys to try this one out on your own, so you're going to pause it. Once you pause it, play it after, check your answer. I'm distributing this negative. I'm going to write it out. 4x squared plus 5x plus 1 minus 6x squared. So distributed here, minus x minus 8. Combine your like terms. Negative 2x squared from the 4x squared and then negative 6x squared. 5x minus x, it's technically a 1x, will give me 4x. And then 1 minus 8 is negative 7. And there is your answer. Okay, so that is subtracting polynomials. So the only difference between adding and subtracting is you have to distribute that negative when you're subtracting these things. That is the whole lesson. Now I do have some optional extra practice for you. If you look right here, you can pause this, you can take a screenshot, you can do whatever you have to do. There are 10 practice problems here. All the answers are in red right below it. And then I have some more right here. If you want to try those out, there are 8 more practice problems with all the answers there. Okay. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to your teacher. We do have office hours that should be posted on our Schoology pages. The homework worksheet is posted as well. Homework worksheet will be very similar to what you guys did throughout these notes. Thanks, guys. Have a